biggest mine in the area. A lot of the other ones actually produce more silver than that.
Wow. The Colonial Mine Tour, underground. And here's the little guy.
Cobalt was the silver capital of the world.
You know that photo of this at mine? There's a bunch of guys standing outside the
I
entrance.
think so, yeah. This is probably the entrance.
So this was never a shaft, it was always just a...
The shafts are over there.
Oh, there is shafts.
There is a couple.
Oh, okay.
But this is just one of the adits. They had a couple adits. They had like 3 or 4 adits and like 4 shafts.
Oh, okay.
Again, it's a little chilly.
Did you do it already?
That's why we heavily suggest some warm clothing. It's a little rocky, but it does have some clay and some sand on the floor, so it should be mostly okay. And also watch your head. We do have hard hats on, but concussions are still a very real thing.
I got a story about this spot right here.
Just keep them safe, honey. Watch them.
Over. I got my hand out. I'm both in this. This is Mommy.
These holes were actually made from dynamite.
There's Mommy up ahead.
Alright, so as I said before, outside the mine, it was the mining capital of the world for a while. So that means everyone from all over the globe pretty much wanted to come to Cobalt to make a quick buck. Now, since most people were coming from all over the world, they also didn't have much mining experience, like none of them. And so they didn't really know what silver looked like. And they were told to look for a dark, sort of sheeny rock. And as you can probably tell, everything looks dark and sheeny down here. So they figured out 2 identifiers. One is these calcite veins here. It's very soft material. You could probably scratch it off with your fingernail or a knife. But this runs parallel, these veins run parallel to silver veins. So it's, again, it's not an exact science, but it's pretty close where you'd find silver around these. So they would chase these all over the place in these mines here. As you will tell, there's probably calcite veins all over the walls here. A second, follow over here.
And just quickly, the calcite is probably what they would have seen on the surface before they started drilling in to the side of this hill, and that's actually why they would have started drilling in, is because they were prospecting, they were looking for signs of silver, and they would have seen that white calcite, and they would have said, all right, let's start drilling and blasting through here. And they did actually find silver.
At least most of the time that was the case. You just clear the topsoil and you'd look for calcite veins, or you would look for this, cobalt blooms, if you guys want to come over here and see. It's this pink stuff in the roof here.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah. That is a signifier of cobalt. Now, again, it's not an exact science, but cobalt is often found with silver. So initially they named this town Cobalt because the silver veins were so rich and so plentiful that they would see this cobalt all over the place. So they thought it was just cobalt here, but they were wrong, and it was silver. And so everybody flocked here. So cobalt, as I'm sure you probably saw,
He would stand here all day and make sure that dynamite was continuously stable, and also to make sure that the miners would not steal any dynamite for their own personal adventures, I suppose. So right over here, you can get a little closer if you want. You can look through it later, but
yeah, we can have everybody funnel through.
so this is a 1904 model of the dynamite bar. What it does is you put the dynamite through these little divided holes, and then you put hot water, boiling water through here. And what this does is kind of thaws the dynamite, because as you can tell, it's very, very cold in here. And if the dynamite was cold, it would be deemed unstable and be very dangerous for the miners to operate with. And right here, the wall is a little bit a foot back as compared to the walls over here. And that is so the water does not drip down into the dynamite and further contaminate it, causing it to be unstable and yet again very dangerous. Now, over here is just a closed off area. We actually found air pressure pipes over here and a wagon over there. Yeah. So you guys can take a look if you'd like.
Want to see the wagon?
That has actually been mixed with water and then over time solidified. So it kind of, I think as they were drilling through here, it kind of spilled out, and over time it kind of solidified like that. But moving on, I mentioned earlier that the way they dug these tunnels was with dynamite. So with what they had to do is they would have to actually drill holes into the wall in a pattern a little bit like this. They would have like a collection of holes in the middle, and they would fill those with dynamite, and they would blow that so that there would be a hole in the middle of wherever they were trying, whatever direction they were trying to go. A little bit like this one here, but on a bigger scale. And then from there, they would detonate the ones on the perimeter. And what this would do is it would actually cause all of the rock to kind of collapse inwards towards that hole for a little bit more of a controlled blast, so that they could actually move in the direction they wanted to instead of just blowing holes everywhere, as would have been otherwise. But in 1907, you can imagine there wasn't really a whole lot of technology. So what they actually had to do to drill all those holes for dynamite is they would have had this hand steel. They would put it down, and then another man with a big sledgehammer would actually be hitting it over and over, and they would be turning it ever so slightly after each hit of the hammer, over and over and over, to make those holes. And yeah, it would have taken about, what was it?
30 minutes.
30 minutes to make one hole, and 30 holes for one blast. And one blast would have gone back about 6 feet into the rock. So you can imagine just how much work went into making these tunnels and all the tunnels below us too. Many, many hours of work, many people just going at it,
Blast,
really.
to be precise.
15 hours for one blast if you just had 2 guys. So yeah. And eventually, they got tired of spending all that time and all that money on people just drilling with their hand. So they invented this. This is our drifter drill. You guys can come a little closer if you'd like. Now this is a, I think, 1930s model. And originally it would not have been on this bar. This is kind of just to hold it up. What they would have had to do, they would have had one guy holding it at about 90 degrees and another man operating it. Now this thing was fed by compressed air. So you can imagine this thing just going crazy trying to drill. It would actually throw back a lot of dust into the miners' faces. And this drill was known as the Widowmaker, largely because the mineral content around cobalt is very high in arsenic. And the arsenic is similar to modern day jackhammers, if you can imagine that. So what they would have done is they would have done, the one guy, because this was operated by one man again, drilling a hole, drilling another hole, drilling 30 holes, stuffing them with dynamite, exploding them, shoveling out the ore, and then going again, and again, and again. And eventually the hole would get so deep that they'd actually have to start lowering the guys down in a bucket like this, attached to the pulleys. And if you can imagine it, this would actually have 4 to 5 guys in it. And if you're thinking that's crazy, it is. And they would actually, to fit all those guys in, they would have one leg in and one leg out. And they'd be holding on to the cable. So if one guy lost his balance and fell out, then that means all the others would fall with him. And if you fall 200 feet, let's say, into a mine shaft,
And they tap on the rock to see whether or not it was hollow. And if they heard a hollow sound, that would mean that it was a very loose rock, and it would move and eventually fall onto the miner. So what they would do is scale the whole area, and they would make sure that the rock that is loose is all pried out, so the miners would not have rock falling on them while they're working.
yeah, because they didn't have hard hats.
Yes,
They would just
have
have
leather
leather
caps.
So if you have a 30-pound rock fall on your head, that's not a good time.
It spells death for pretty much
Yes.
most people.
And as they were going and looking for silver, they would drill anywhere. So they drilled horizontally, vertically, parallel, and sometimes they would drill up. So this is a stope, and what they would use to drill this all the way up here is a stoper. Now this is a stoper, it's 150 pounds, and it's a cast iron drill, and it has a water tank added to it, it's attached. And what would happen is they would use it up like this, and there'd be water constantly falling on them, and that would result in a lot of illnesses such as pneumonia, and a lot of miners got sick because of that. And eventually, as it got higher, as you can see, they used scaffolding, and they would kind of balance on these beams and continue. And as this is very dangerous, they did have some safety precautions, which are over here. So, the first one is a rock bolt, and it's kind of a triangular piece that they would wedge into various corners and cracks, and they would leave that there until the morning. And in the morning, if the bolts fell onto the ground, they would know that the rock definitely moved and it was loose, and they would have to fix that immediately. And then they would use wedges, which are just pieces of wood, and they would do the same kind of thing. They would wedge it in corners or cracks.
A bit, so inside here is hollow. Well, I guess that's not hollow, but it would have a bit inside that is hollow, similar to this, but it would probably be much longer than that. And it would have industrial diamonds encrusted in the edges to make it nice and sharp and keep it nice and honed for the drilling of this, because it's very precise. They didn't want to have anything go wrong and have the bit snap and pay thousands of dollars that they were going to spend on whatever else they would spend it on. This is also water cooled to make sure the bit, again, has no stress on it, or very little. So they would have this go down, extract the sample, and they would split that sample in half. And initially they were just looking at it to see, I guess in this, I'll give you an example. They would look at it to see if there's any silver in it. You would probably polish it up just to see if there's any silver. But eventually they just broke it in half, kept one half at the mine, and they sent the other half to a laboratory to be examined, and they would tell them exactly what's in it, the percentage.
A little small for a ton of ore,
Oh yeah.
but the rocks were actually incredibly heavy. If you tried to lift anything at the museum that we had, you would have noticed it was very, very heavy for its size. And you can see that it's kind of run on the rail system that we've left a little bit behind. And these would have been running throughout the entirety of the mine, ferrying ore carts back and forth, collecting ore. And they might have brought it to an ore chute like this, a little bit just through the gate. Yeah. These are what they would have used to bring ore to other.
Number 2, if you would like.